Long Island medium star Theresa Caputo is planning to start a new business, but her ex-husband Larry Caputo is standing in the way. Larry has made it clear that Theresa must first pay off her debts, or he will be forced to take legal action. He has warned that if the money is not paid, he will file a complaint with the police. This financial dispute could put Theresa's new venture in jeopardy. Theresa Caputo sat at her kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. She had spent years building her reputation as the Long Island medium, connecting people with their loved ones in the spirit world. But now, the only thing haunting her was a financial nightmare. She had a plan, a brand new business that would revolutionize spiritual readings. But there was one problem: Larry. Her ex-husband had always been supportive of her gift, but after their divorce, things had changed. Now he was demanding she pay off outstanding debts before starting anything new, and if she didn't, he'd take legal action. Theresa sighed, rubbing her temples. The spirits could whisper secrets from beyond the grave, but they couldn't tell her how to handle a bitter ex and a mountain of debt. That evening, as she prepared for a reading with a client, a chill ran down her spine. She turned, expecting to see a spirit lingering nearby. But it was just her thoughts, dark and heavy. The next morning, a letter arrived. A legal notice from Larry's lawyer. He wasn't bluffing. If she didn't pay up, he'd report her to the authorities. Theresa had to make a choice: fight for her new venture or settle her debts first. She picked up her phone, ready to call her lawyer. She wasn't going down without a fight. As she dialed, she muttered under her breath, "Spirits, if you're listening, I could use a miracle." However, Mia sat in her living room, clutching an old photograph of her mother, who had passed away years ago. The grief never really left her, and she longed for one last conversation. Her best friend, Emily, had been insisting for weeks. "You need to see Theresa Caputo. She helps people find closure." Skeptical but desperate, Mia finally agreed. The day of the reading, she walked into a softly lit room where Theresa Caputo, with her signature blonde hair and warm smile, welcomed her. Mia's hands trembled as she took a seat. Theresa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Suddenly, she gasped, her eyes widening. "Your mother is here," she said. "She says you still wear her locket every day." Mia's heart pounded. She hadn't told anyone about the locket hidden beneath her sweater. "She wants you to know that she never truly left," Theresa continued. "She's been with you, when you got the promotion, when you cried alone at night, even when you thought she wasn't listening. She's proud of you, Mia." Tears spilled down Mia's cheeks. "She says she left something for you, a letter inside the old red box in the attic." Mia's breath hitched. There was an old red box in the attic, one she had never dared to open. Rushing home after the session, she climbed up to the attic, dust swirling around her as she pulled the box from the shadows. With shaking hands, she opened it. Inside, among old trinkets and faded memories, was a yellowed envelope with her name on it. She tore it open, her mother's handwriting staring back at her. "My dearest Mia, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. But know this, I will always be by your side. Follow your dreams, be fearless, and love yourself the way I always loved you." Mia sobbed, clutching the letter to her chest. For the first time in years, the weight on her heart felt lighter. Theresa Caputo had given her the greatest gift, the gift of closure. However, Theresa Caputo had experienced countless spirit readings, but nothing had ever shaken her quite like this. It was a crisp autumn evening, and she was at a private session in a cozy Long Island home. The client, a young woman named Rachel, had reached out to her, desperate to connect with her late mother. As Theresa settled into her usual routine, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached out to the spirit world. Almost immediately, an overwhelming presence filled the room. The air grew dense, and an unnatural chill crept over her skin. "She's here," Theresa said, her voice steady but her stomach twisting. Rachel's eyes welled with tears. "Mom, is she okay?" Theresa listened to the whispers only she could hear. She wants you to know she's watching over you, but something's wrong. Suddenly, the candle on the table flickered violently before going out entirely. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply that both women could see their breath. Theresa gasped. She had encountered strong spirits before, but this was different. Then a voice, not in her head, but in the room, spoke. "Not your mother." Rachel clutched Theresa's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered in terror. Theresa's heart pounded. She had no explanation. The presence wasn't just a spirit reaching out. It was something else, something darker. "Who are you?" Theresa demanded, her voice shaking. The lights flickered. A shadow moved across the room. A whisper slithered through the air. "You shouldn't be here." Rachel let out a strangled cry as a picture frame flew off the shelf, crashing onto the floor. Theresa grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the door. "We're done," Theresa said firmly, her instincts screaming at her to leave. "This isn't your mother." As they stepped outside, the house behind them seemed to exhale, the oppressive energy lifting. Theresa turned to Rachel, her face pale. "Listen to me," she said. "Your mother loved you, but this spirit, whatever it is, it's not her. Don't try to reach out again." Rachel nodded, trembling. Theresa had always prided herself on her ability to handle spirits. But as she drove away, one thought haunted her. Some doors should never be opened. However, Tony had always been a skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, mediums, none of it made sense to him. But after losing his beloved grandmother, Maria, something inside him longed for answers. When he heard that Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, was coming to his town for a special reading event, he impulsively bought a ticket. The event was packed. People from all walks of life sat in anticipation, hoping for a message from beyond. Tony sat in the back, arms crossed, telling himself he was just there to observe. Theresa walked onto the stage, her signature blonde hair bouncing as she greeted the audience with her infectious energy. "All right, who's ready to hear from Spirit?" she said, scanning the crowd. As she moved through the room, delivering messages of love and closure, she suddenly stopped and turned toward Tony's section. Her expression softened. "I have a grandmother coming through. Maria, does that mean anything to someone here?" Tony's heart nearly stopped, his hands clenched into fists. "She's saying, Tony, she's here for a Tony." A shiver ran down his spine. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he raised his hand. The crowd turned to look at him. Theresa smiled. "She wants you to know she's always with you," she says. "Stop being so stubborn, kid." A few people chuckled, but Tony felt tears prick at his eyes. That was exactly something his grandmother would say. "She's also showing me a necklace, a small gold locket." Tony's breath caught in his throat. His grandmother had left him a locket with her picture inside, but he never wore it. It sat in his drawer, untouched. Theresa nodded. "She's saying, 'Wear it, Tony. I'm closer than you think.'" At that moment, all of Tony's doubts melted away. Maybe, just maybe, some connections never really fade. As he left the event, he reached into his pocket, gripping the small locket he had brought with him but never opened. That night, for the first time in years, he felt his grandmother's presence, warm, loving, and very, very real. However, David Parker had never believed in psychics, mediums, or anything remotely supernatural. A hard-headed journalist, he had spent years debunking so-called spiritualists who preyed on the vulnerable. So when his editor assigned him to cover a live session with Theresa Caputo, the famed Long Island medium, he scoffed. "This will be fun," he muttered sarcastically as he entered the packed event hall. He sat in the back, arms crossed, watching as Theresa moved through the audience, delivering messages from the other side. He noted every vague statement, every generalized claim, waiting for the moment he could expose her tricks. Then, suddenly, Theresa's expression changed. She turned in his direction. "Sir, in the back, with the blue shirt," she called out. David stiffened. "You're very skeptical. I can feel that," she said with a smile. "But there's someone here for you. A woman. She's saying, 'Davy, my little Davy, does that mean anything to you?'" David's breath hitched. His mother was the only person who had ever called him that. She had passed away when he was just 16. He had never told anyone about the nickname. "She wants to tell you she's sorry," Theresa continued. "She says she didn't mean to leave you so soon, and she's showing me a music box. A blue one." David's eyes widened. His mother's old blue music box had been his most treasured possession as a child. He had lost it in a house fire years ago. There was no way Theresa could know about it. His vision blurred as tears welled up. He wasn't just hearing words, he felt his mother's presence. "She's always with you, Davy," Theresa said softly. "She wants you to stop blaming yourself for not being there that day." David covered his mouth, choking back a sob. He had been in a friend's house when his mother suffered a fatal stroke. He had always carried the guilt of not being home. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just a skeptic. He was a believer. As he left the session, wiping his eyes, he realized something. Some things in life couldn't be explained, and maybe, just maybe, they weren't meant to be. However, James Carter had never believed in psychics, spirits, or anything remotely supernatural. As a science teacher and a proud skeptic, he always dismissed such things as tricks or coincidences. But when his wife Emily insisted they attend a live reading with Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, he reluctantly agreed, mostly to prove her wrong. The event was held in a packed theater, filled with eager believers hoping for messages from the beyond. James sat with his arms crossed, his expression one of mild annoyance as Theresa walked onto the stage, her signature blonde hair styled high, her energy electric. Within minutes, she was delivering messages to people in the audience. Tears flowed, gasps echoed, and James rolled his eyes until she suddenly turned toward him. "You," she said, pointing directly at him. "The man who doesn't believe." The crowd murmured. James straightened in his seat, caught off guard. "There's a strong presence around you," Theresa continued. "A father figure. He's showing me a fishing pole. Does that mean anything to you?" James's heart skipped a beat. His father, whom he had lost nearly a decade ago, had been an avid fisherman. But he shook his head. "That could apply to a lot of people," he said, trying to sound indifferent. Theresa smiled knowingly. "He's telling me you always doubted the afterlife. He says you've even told people that when we die, that's it, just darkness." James stiffened. That was exactly what he had always said. "He says you still have the pocketknife he gave you when you were 12. Theresa continued, her voice softening. "The one with the initials JC engraved on it." James's breath caught in his throat. His father had gifted him that knife decades ago, and it was still tucked away in his drawer. No one outside his family knew about it. Tears welled in his eyes as Theresa's gaze locked. "He wants you to know he's with you, that he's proud of you, and that love never dies." James swallowed hard. In that moment, every ounce of skepticism melted away. He wasn't sure how she knew, but he could feel it, his father's presence, warm and undeniable. As the session continued, James sat silently, tears streaming down his face. He had come in a skeptic, but he was leaving a believer. However, it was a cool autumn afternoon in Long Island when Theresa Caputo arrived at the small, cozy home of the Daniels family. The leaves crunched under her feet as she walked up the driveway, feeling an unusual heaviness in the air. She had been invited by Lisa Daniels, a grieving mother who had lost her son, Jake, just a year ago in a tragic accident. As Theresa stepped inside, she was greeted by Lisa and her husband, Mark. But it wasn't just them. Sitting quietly on the couch was Emma, their 7-year-old daughter, clutching a stuffed teddy bear. Her big blue eyes held a sadness far beyond her years. Theresa sat down across from them and took a deep breath. Almost immediately, she felt a strong presence, a child's energy. She looked at Emma and then at Lisa. "Your son, Jake," Theresa whispered, her voice soft but sure. Lisa gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Yes," she choked out, tears already forming in her eyes. Theresa smiled gently. "He's here. He's been trying to talk to you." Lisa let out a small sob, and Mark reached over to hold her hand. But Emma sat still, her gaze fixed on Theresa. Theresa turned her attention to the little girl. "Sweetheart, do you sometimes feel like your brother is still around? Maybe like he's playing tricks on you?" Emma's lips trembled as she nodded. "Sometimes my toys move by themselves, and I hear him calling my name when I'm trying to sleep." Theresa's smile grew warmer. "That's because he is calling your name. He wants you to know he's okay. He's saying, 'Emma, I'm still your big brother. I'm always going to protect you.'" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she hugged her teddy bear tighter. "I miss him." Theresa placed a hand on her chest. "He misses you too, but he's happy. He says you shouldn't be sad. He wants you to smile when you think about him." Lisa wiped her tears. "Does he know how much we love him?" Theresa nodded. "Oh, absolutely. He says, 'Mom, stop feeling guilty. It wasn't your fault.'" Lisa broke down. "I should have picked him up from school that day. If I had." Theresa shook her head. "No, Jake doesn't want you to think like that. He says, 'Mom, I love you. I need you to let go of the pain so you can live.'" Lisa sobbed into Mark's shoulder, but there was a shift in the air, less grief, more peace. Emma, still holding her teddy, whispered, "Jake, I love you." Theresa smiled. He just whispered back, "I love you more, sis." For the first time in a long time, Emma smiled. And in that moment, they all felt it, a warmth in the room, a presence unseen but deeply felt. Jake was still with them, and always would be.